And here we go. So our class that we've built so far, we have our room, we have our instance variables, length, width, height, and name. We have our different constructors. We can set the height of our room. We can get the volume of our room, have a nice output of the string version of our room, and we can check if two rooms are the same as each other. And in here, we are creating two rooms and then checking if they're the same or not. Now, today we are going to be covering the iteration looping segment of the of our class. So instead of having two rooms that we define from the get-go, let's ask the user how many rooms they have in their house, and let's build rooms based on their user input. So I'm going to comment this out so you can still read it once we're finished with this. You will all have a link to this. It'll be on today's lesson plan. But we're going to essentially start from scratch. We're going to build a house full of different rooms according to user input. In order to get user input, we need to make sure we import our java.util.scanner. We need access to the scanner class, and we need a scanner object. So scanner, I usually call my scanners in equals new scanner with system.in as a parameter. So we now have access to our user input. So our first thing we want to ask the user is how many rooms there are in their home. So we are going to system.out.print how many rooms, let's say, enter the number of rooms. So we're asking them to enter that number, and then we are going to make an int num rooms equal to our in.next int. So we're going to get a number from the user, and we're going to do something with it. So for each room, we want to find the dimensions and name of that room from the user and build a room using those parameters. So if I know how many times I'm going to be looping before I start, we know that we're going to be looping num rooms number of times. So let's use a for loop for this. So for int I equals 0, I less than num rooms, I plus plus. Then we can ask our user for all the different parameters about a room. And actually, if I want to have a little message saying enter the length for room number 1, room number 2, etc., it might be better if we start I at 1, because that makes for a better user experience. So instead of starting at room 0, we start at room 1, and we'll edit our condition to include room number of rooms so that excuse me, sorry about that, so that we don't lose a count. So we start at 1, but we include our number of rooms so that we have the same number of loops. So then we are going to ask the user for each of the parameters. So system.out.print, enter the length for room number plus I plus colon, and our int len equals in.next int, and we can copy this and paste it for our width and height. And we'll make two different variables for those. They'll still be ints, width, and HEI for height. And last, we want to get the name, enter the name for room number I. This is going to be a string. String name equals in dot next line. So we're going to get the next string that they type in, and let's just test that this loop works right now. Let's see what happens. So I run, and I am an error. Where is my error? I am bad at typing the letter I. It should be capitalized. Next int with a capital I. And that should be the same error 3 times. So there we go. Our number of rooms, let's say I have 3 rooms. The length for our room number 1 is going to be 5, 5, and 5. And hold on, I didn't get a chance to enter the name for my first room. Why is that? What happened here?
There was a next int before it.
Correct. So because we have a next int before our next line is going to see the enter that we typed in to submit that next int. And it's going to say, oh, that line that's my whole line. So to fix that error, we're just going to call our in.next line before we call it for real, so that we eat that new line and we can actually enter something here. So let's try that again. So we have 3 rooms, 5, 5, 5. No, that's 56. And that's room A. Room 2, 6, 6, and 9 with room letter B. And our third room, 4, 3, 2, letter C. All right, that all seems to have worked. So let's use those values to create some room variables. So our room, new room equals new room with len, width, pay, and name. And let's print out our room. So system.out.println new room. Let's run that. Let's only make 2 rooms this time, 5, 5, 5, with name A. So we have an A room with a width of 5, height of 5, and a length of 5. And our room 2, let's make it 999 with a name of A. We have a hay room with a width of 9, height of 9, and a length of 9. So that all looks like it's working just fine. We are making our different room objects. Now let's say that we want to find the total volume for the home that we're working with here. In order to do that, we can call the getVolume method on each room after we create it. So we also are going to want to make a total volume variable to store what the actual total is for our whole house. So our int total volume is going to start at 0. And then each time in our loop, we can get the volume of our room. So int room vol equals new room dot get volume. I'm going to call our get volume, and then we can add that volume to our total volume. So total volume plus equals room vol. So we're going to add our room's volume to our total, and then at the end of our loop, after our loop is finished, we can system.out.println your home with plus num rooms has a total volume of total volume with an exclamation point. So let's test this. Let's see if that works. Always be testing. So let's say we have 2 rooms again. Our length 555. Our name room A. We have an A room with a width of 5, height of 5, and a length of 5. Our second room 777. Our name, that's our B room. Our home with 2 rooms has a total volume of 468. All right, that looks like it works just fine. Now, there's a place where our user could mess up our output a little bit. Let's say we're only entering 1 room. We have 999, and they just press enter on the name. Then we have a nothing room with a length, width, and height. So that works kind of, except do we want the user to be able to enter nothing for the room? I think that's a little kind of silly. So let's make sure that the user can't enter nothing for the room name. So after we get the user's name, or not the user's name, the room's name, we want to check whether it's nothing or not. And we want to keep asking until they have entered something that isn't nothing. So if we don't know how many times we're going to be looping here, we don't know how many times the user is just going to hit enter, enter, enter until they actually type in a room name. When we don't know, we are going to use a while loop. So we can check while our name equals an empty string, and then we can output that was a bad name. And we can ask them to enter a name for our room again. So if we run this, no. I don't need to redefine name. That was my fault. Because name has already been defined, we just need to reassign it. So let's say we have 1 room again with a dimensions of 777. And if I press enter, nothing changed. My code didn't get fixed. What happened? What's wrong here? Because clearly we didn't enter our while loop, even though I did enter nothing.
You have to use dot equals.
That's correct. So I can't use an equals equals with 2 strings. I need to use my dot equals method with strings to actually compare their contents. So let's try that again. 1 room, 777. And now if I press enter, I see that was a bad name. And I can hit enter as many times as I want. And I'm going to keep getting that was a bad name, enter a name, until I enter a good name. Then we have a good room with our width, height, and length, and our total volume. So that fixes that. But now we have those 2 lines of code are repeated. It's a bit redundant. So let's say instead of doing it outside, let's say our name starts at empty. And while it equals nothing, we don't want to have our output happen first before they have a chance to enter anything. So let's move that to the bottom of our loop. And we need something in between our input and our output saying that was bad. So if they have good input, we need to have an if statement. So if our input was good, what do we want to do?
Break.
We want to break, correct. So that we exit this loop before we say that was a bad name. Now, our condition is we want to check essentially the opposite of this. So if it's not equal to a nothing, so if not name dot equals empty quotes, then we will break. So if they entered anything other than it equals, even if it was just a space, they at least tried to input something, then we exit the loop before we say that was a bad name. Unfortunately, break is only going to exit this loop. It's not going to exit our for loop as well. So that one will keep running as long as we have more rooms. Now, there is still a little bit of redundancy here. Is it possible for name to change in between checking the condition here and checking the condition here after we have printed that was a bad name? I don't think it's possible, because the only thing that happens in between checking that condition and checking this condition is a print statement. So since it's impossible for this one to ever exit the loop if we didn't exit the loop here, we don't actually need to make a comparison here. We can just say while true, loop forever, as long as this value is true, which true is never not going to be true. So loop forever. And then in the middle of our loop, we have our if our name is not empty, then we are going to break. So that's how we're preventing this from being an infinite loop. So that will all work correctly. It should look exactly the same as before. Enter the number of rooms. Let's say I have 2 rooms this time. Our length 555, our A room, and our room 2 777. That's the B room. All right, and that all worked correctly. I forgot to actually test my loop, but it does work perfectly with good input, which is good to know. Let's just double check with bad input, and I can enter nothing for as long as I want until I actually type something in, then we are good. All right, so our loop here works like we want it to. Now, if we want to incorporate our looping over the contents of a string, let's say we want to print out the names of all of our rooms after we've printed out the home's total volume. So let's say we get a string all names equals, and we're going to start that as empty. We have nothing in that string so far. I'm going to move that just a little bit. That's going to go right here. So we're making our total volume and our total names right next to each other. Then once we have gotten our name, so after our while loop, we can add that name to our all names. So all names plus equals name, and let's add a tab escape character so that we can find that tab so that every room name can be on its own line afterward. So we're going to add a tab, and because escape characters are treated as one character, we can use the single quotes and have this be an actual character value, which is very convenient. So after our loop is over, after we've gotten all of our names, all of our everything, let's system.out.println the rooms in your home are. Then let's say we create another string, edited names, start that as the word the, so that we'll have the the A room, the B room, etc. So if we want to look through every character in our all names string, we're going to have another for loop. For int I equals 0, I less than our all names dot length. Remember that we do not want to include the length, so we don't want to go less than or equal to. We just want less than, and we want to increase I by 1 each time. We are going to get the character at this current index. So char current char equals all names dot char at I. We want to check if the character we're looking at is a tab, because we know every name has a tab after it. So if current char equals the tab escape character, we want to add the word room and a new line. So our edited names plus equals the word room, a new line, and then the word the again for the next room in our sequence. If we didn't have a /t, so else, we're going to add just the character we're looking at, current char. So then we can system.out.print line edited names. Let's see how this looks. I missed a semicolon on this line. Let's try that again. Say we have 3 rooms. 5, 5, 5. This is the very good room. We have 7, 7, 7. Even better room. And then 100, 100, 100. Best room. All right, so we have the very good room, the even better room, and the best room. We are missing a space, so let's add a space in there. And we also have the at the end of our code, at the end of our output. So we want to, let's substring that away. Let's get that out with the substring. So the length of our edited names is going to be right here, right at the very end. So we want to get rid of 1, 2, 3, 4 characters. We want to get rid of the space and then E, H, and T. So let's say edited names equals edited names dot substring starting at 0 and going up until edited names dot length -4. So we want to get rid of the last 4 characters in our string. Let's see if that works. Let's just do 2 rooms this time. 5, 5, 5. Very good. And 1, 1, 1. Very bad. It's a very small room. So the rooms in our home are the very good room and the very bad room. That looks like it worked exactly like we want it to. All right. The last thing let's add is let's check if the previous room that we entered is the same as the room that we entered just now. So before our loop starts, I'm going to make a room previous room. I'm going to make that equal the default constructor. So we're going to make it a basic room, a basic 10 by 10 by 10 room. Then in our loop, let's check if the new room is the same as the previous room. Now, if we're entering our first room, there's not anything to compare to. So let's say if our I does not equal 1. So if we're not on our first room that we're entering, then let's check if our rooms are the same. And in a previous class, we wrote that code. So we can actually just kind of steal this code from ourselves. I'm going to copy that, paste it in here. I'm going to uncomment that and make sure it's indented correctly. And now I just want to make sure that my variable names are all correct. So instead of office and basic room, we're going to use our new room and our previous room. We're going to use our room vol variable. And since we're not storing the previous room's volume, we're just going to have to call previous room dot get volume to check if those are the same. Otherwise, those are not the same. So we don't have to make any changes in the else. And then after our loop is over, or after we've made that comparison, we want to reassign our previous room to be the one we just entered. So previous room equals new room. So that the next time through the loop, when I create my new room, I can compare that new room to my new previous room, which is the one we just entered. So let's test this. Let's run this and see what happens. So let's say we have 4 different rooms. Our first room, 777, and it has the name A. So we have an A room with a width, height, and length of 7. Let's say room number 2, also 777 with the name A. Those rooms are the same. Now let's say we enter a different room, 777, but this is a B room. So those rooms have the same volume, but not the same dimensions. So maybe our message can use a little bit of updating dimensions / name. Because our dimensions are the same, but they have a different name. So that should clarify that a little bit. And then our last one, let's say our room is 10, 10, 10, and that's room C. So we have a width, height, and length of 10. Now those rooms, the 10, 10, 10, and the 777B, those are not the same room whatsoever. So our home has a total volume of 2,029, and the rooms in our home are the A room, the B room, and the C room. We have our 4 beautiful rooms that we have established in our loop. All right, any questions on any of the stuff that we built here, how it all works? Anything else that you feel should be covered?
Can you, I know you did this in an earlier class, but can you show me the code where you compared and printed out the comparison for the dimensions?
Absolutely. So that's in our room.java. That's in our equals method. So we are going to be, in our equals method, we're going to compare the instance variables for the object we're currently within to the instance variables of this other room, this other room type object. So I made a variable, a Boolean for each of my instance variables, checking if my length in my current object is the same as the length in my other object. And I did the same for width, height, and name. Remember, with strings, we need to use dot equals instead of equals equals. And then I'm returning same length and same width and same height and same name. If all 4 of those things are true, then we know those 2 objects have the same contents, even if they don't have the same reference. Does that make sense?
More or less.
Cool. Okay. Any other topics that you guys would like me to cover before we wrap up? All righty then, folks. I will